Satan's Underground. Forward. By Johanna Michelson. This will not be an easy book for you to read. The story of Lauren's abuse, of the years of horrors and tortures she experienced, of the satanic rituals and murders she witnessed, will prove more than many of you can bear. Some of you will be tempted to dismiss this book altogether, comforting yourselves with the thought that the whole story is so beyond belief that it simply cannot be true, that she must have made the whole thing up, that things like this simply does not happen in today's civilized world, and that even if they do, they probably involve an insignificant minority of people, so we do not want to know about the happenings. That attitude is precisely what Satanists are counting on. They are depending on our disbelief, fear, and ignorance from our offhand rejection of cases like Lauren's. Yet victims across the country are telling stories very much like hers. In virtually every city and town I have traveled to during the last 3 years, at least one person has come to me after my lecture to tell me, often weeping and in frightened whispers, of rituals, abuse, and human sacrifice. Hundreds of children in preschools and kindergartens across the country are talking about grown-ups in robes, chanting in a strange guttural language while they perform dark ceremonies that include sexual abuse. They tell about watching animals and little babies being tortured and killed with knives. At least 70 preschools in the Los Angeles area have been investigated for alleged ritualistic abuse of children in the last few years. Similar cases can be found in preschools and neighborhoods in every state of this country. The stories these children tell are so inconceivably horrifying that few individuals in the court system believe them. But then again, it was only a few short years ago that we had a problem in believing that incest was rampant. How much harder it is for most of us to accept the fact that there are groups of parents and teachers, doctors, lawyers, ministers, or other pillars of the community who are involved in devil worship and ritual abuse of children. Law enforcement officers and detectives have told me that in many parts of this country their officers no longer even bother to record the ritualistic aspects of a crime. They know that the chances of gaining a court conviction in any case that even breathes the word satanic are virtually zero. As stated in an official report presented in September 1986 by John K. Van de Kamp, Attorney General of the state of California, in reference to a major child abuse case in Bakersfield, California, it can be firmly stated that the satanic allegations eroded the children's credibility and ultimately their ability to testify about what happened to them. If there is one thing that cult Satanists do well, it is covering their tracks in such a way as to thoroughly discredit witnesses who might seek to come against them. That task is especially easy for them when dealing with young children, which is one reason children make such ideal victims. The child may muster the courage to testify that he saw a little animal tortured, killed, and buried, yet when and if the site is dug up, no conclusive animal remains are found. He may speak of having naked pictures taken, but none ever surface in the usual circles. He may talk of having been taken on an airplane somewhere where someone did bad things to him, but in the time span during which the child was away from his home, it was impossible to have taken a flight to the stated location. So, the child is discredited, fostering the belief that it is old-fashioned and ridiculous to believe that anyone would tell stories like these. Yet in the past few years adult survivors, defectors from Satanist camps, and investigators have begun to shed some light on the Satanists' tactics. Animals are indeed killed and buried, but are later dug up and disposed of elsewhere. The children are frequently given a stupefying drug before the rituals so that their senses and perceptions are easily manipulated in the dim candlelight of the ritual scene. The pornographic photographs taken of the children do not show up because they are carefully kept in vaults of private collectors. And the airplane trips were guided imagery/visualization voyages taken while the children were on the drugs slipped to them in their lemonade. Or perhaps the plane ride was quite real, but they were flown only a short distance to the abuse site and not to some distant place as the child was told. It is indeed conceivable that some given child could be mistaken or even lying about having been abused or forced to participate in a ritual experience. It is also possible for a therapist to ask a child enough leading questions to glean the desired declaration of abuse. But what is absolutely impossible and illogical for us to believe is that every single child telling these stories is lying or has been programmed by parents or therapists. There are simply too many such children all over the country, spontaneously and independently telling the same horrific stories, virtually point for point. The same holds true for the adult survivors who are now beginning to speak up. Too many of them are telling the same story. It is painful to hear these stories. It tears at the very depth of one's mind and soul to learn of the unspeakably deliberate evil that man is capable of committing. It is especially hard for Christians to handle. Many of us would rather, as I have frequently been told, simply talk about Jesus. I understand that, so would I. And yet the victims are here, thousands of them, those who are desperately seeking for a way out of the clutching blackness of demonic cults. To whom shall they go? To whom shall we send them for help, if we who call ourselves by the name of Christ refuse to believe, let alone understand? To help them we must know something of what they have lived through. We must understand some of the basics of Satanism and ritualistic abuse. We must understand some of the basic working of brainwashing and mind control. We must, above all, know how to fight spiritual warfare in a balanced and scriptural fashion, patiently allowing the Lord to bring healing to these shattered lives in His time. If you do not understand these basics, you will never reach the hearts and souls of victims. I believe that Lauren's story will go a long way in helping you understand. If you still believe that you can comfortably live in today's world as a Christian and not deal with the reality of Satanism, think again. Satanism is on the rise. It is not a passing fad that will fade if we all just ignore it or throw a few positive confessions at it. Not every Satanist group is involved in animal or human sacrifices, but a growing number of them certainly are. According to the hundreds of news clippings from papers across the country, according to dozens of police reports which I have read, according to detectives and law enforcement officials with whom I have met or spoken, according to therapists and frightened parents, according to the victims and according to many Satanists themselves, Satanism is here. It will not go away simply because you refuse to believe it. This story is not just for detectives and law enforcement to learn from, although they will. It is not just for pastors, therapists, and mental health professionals, although the information contained in the end of this book will provide insights vital to their ministry to victims. This book is also for teenagers, because they are prime targets for the Satanist who lures them with promises of power and glory. It is for every Christian who believes that for this purpose the Son of God was manifested, that He might destroy the works of the devil. It is for every believer who understands that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. It is for every Christian who knows Jesus Christ has already won the victory. Ultimately, this book is not about pornography or Satan. It is about the overwhelming power and victory of the Lord Jesus Christ. It is about the hope and light and healing and freedom that He can bring into the most hopeless and shattered of lives. Lauren has written this book with her tears. She has written it to tell the world that because Jesus Christ is Lord, she has been set free. You can be too.